Green Breakdown. This is Steve Gottenham. He's executive director of the Climate Science Coalition of America and author of 4 books on energy, climate change, and sustainable development, with over 100,000 copies in print. Steve's new book, Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure, come out last August. Steve has a website called stevegottenham.com altogether. Welcome, Steve Gottenham.
Hello, Armando. Great to join you again.
Thank you for being here. Steve, companies like BlackRock, JP Morgan, and other Wall Street companies, famous companies normally, are reconsidering investments in climate change. Are there clear reasons for that? We can predict what are they thinking?
Yes, this was a recent announcement just a week or two ago, and they said they're stepping back from their goals. BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan, other Wall Street firms, many of them had joined a group called Climate Action 100. And the purpose of this was to drive ESG, environmental, social, and governance. But there was a big E in the ESG, and a lot of that was to get rid of hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, both from investments and from their investors and their partners. But they have stepped back from that recently. They announced that a number of them were withdrawing from Climate Action 100. And one of the big reasons was that they were getting pressure in the United States from a number of states, from Texas and West Virginia and Florida and some other states, who said that, well, if you're going to go against hydrocarbon fuels, we're not going to invest in your pension funds and your other financial instruments. So that was a big factor. And then I think the other thing that isn't mentioned in most of the articles that discuss it is that the renewable energy companies are not doing very well. An example is the RENIX index, and you can put up a chart on that. It's the RENIXX index, which is a stock index fund of about 30 of the world's leading renewable energy companies, and that has been down for about 3 years in a row now. It's down about 50%. And a typical example is the EVgo stock price, which is a electric vehicle charging company in the United States that peaked about 20, and it's down about 2.5. And we're seeing this around the world. We're seeing that renewable energy companies are not very good investments right now. And so I think that also factored into the thoughts by Vanguard and BlackRock and these other firms. And so they pulled back on their emphasis on ESG and climate change.
You sent to me a couple of slides, so please ask and I can put on the screen anytime you want.
Sure.
But these companies are driven basically by people of ESG trends or are general people? Because BlackRock, for instance, is not an ESG investor only. They invest in everything, no?
Well, they do, but they've had a big bias toward green energy, toward net zero. Recently, a number of these firms have said they would no longer invest in coal, oil, natural gas, or those companies. Mm-hmm. And so they've been trying to drive that issue, but it's apparently they're stepping back. It's not working very well. They're getting, as I say, a lot of negative positions and comments from various states and various governments. And then it just isn't a very good investment for them right now. And I think maybe this is one of the first signs of the coming green breakdown, as my book talks about. There are many, many others that we're seeing some early signs.
So it's a shame to invest in oil and gas and coal nowadays?
Well, the world is, and particularly the wealthy nations of the world, the United States, Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and a few others are pushing for this net zero idea to be carbon dioxide net zero by 2050 in terms of emissions. And that basically means getting rid of things that burn things, coal, oil, and gas, fuels that we burn. And then whatever we can't stop burning, they would like to capture the carbon dioxide from, so-called carbon dioxide capture and storage.
Mhm.
And so that is a big driver, and most of the governments of the world have signed up to that right now.
Yeah.
And so the financial firms have followed the government leads, and that's where we are. But as I say in my book, this is going to break down, and it is breaking down. This is something that really isn't possible. Our society is based on hydrocarbons nowadays, and not only for fuel, but for everything that we
Petrochemicals.
do. Right, our smartphones, our clothing is made from synthetics, from hydrocarbons. Our medicines, our medical supplies,
Yeah.
our vehicles are manufactured using hydrocarbons, and they burn hydrocarbon fuel. We have stores that are lined with plastic bottles from hydrocarbons. And about half of the world's food is grown using synthetic nitrogen made from hydrocarbons. And then we also have tractors everywhere that are farming the land. So our society is based on these fuels, and it's not going to be easy to get rid of them, particularly not within a couple, 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah, that's right. This slide that you sent to me is a part of this.
Yeah, that's the RENX
No.
index curve, the renewable
Oh.
energy stock index over the last 3 years or so. And as you
Okay.
can see, it's been falling. It's not doing very well.
Yeah, falling very, very fast. Yeah, that's right. And the famous and the owner of private jets, Secretary John Kerry, called for a ban on all coal-fired power plants. But is there a solution? Is there
He did.
life without
That's really
coal?
yeah, that's really a terrible statement. And that's the next slide. Go the next one after this. Today there are 6,500 coal-fired power plants operating in the world. Another 1,000 are in planning or under construction. And coal provides 35% of the world's electricity.
Wow.
In the United States, it's about 16%, and less in Brazil, I think. Brazil uses a lot of hydropower. But
Yes.
throughout the world, we have places like China and India that are getting 60 or 70% from coal. And even with that, we have a shortage of electricity globally. About 700 million people today do not have access to electricity across the world. We have more than 100 hospitals that don't have electricity, if you can imagine that. Hundreds of hospitals don't have air conditioning. They don't have electricity for operating rooms. We also have about 2 billion people that have blackouts or brownouts every day or every other day. So like what I say to my audiences in the US is, if you have an air conditioner in the United States, that one appliance uses more electricity than a third of the world's people get to use on any given day. And so Mr. Kerry's statement is really unfortunate and remarkable. I like to compare it to what Marie Antoinette said during the French Revolution. She said, if the poor people don't have food, let them eat cake. Well, that is sort of Mr. Kerry's statement. Getting rid of all the coal-fired power plants would mean that many people across the world would not have electricity. A very, very sad situation.
It's a little bit similar to Farid Birol in May 2021 that said to stop every new project for oil and gas. It's something similar, no?
Yes, that's the same thing. And I remember Director Birol of the International Energy Agency, I'm sure he has a smartphone made from plastic. And he was, the picture I saw, he was wearing a suit, and I'm sure he had shoes on, and those come from synthetics as well. As I say, everything in our society is based on hydrocarbons, and that's just the way things are. What we need to be doing is reducing real pollution, air pollutants, water pollutants, plastic in the oceans, not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an odorless, harmless, invisible gas, and it really shouldn't even be called a pollutant. That's very, very sad.
There is a warn from climate activists that new children is forbidden. So they say that having children contributes to global warming. Oh, it's something crazy.
Well, they do. They say that for each child that is born, yeah, go down one more slide at least. At least each child that is born is producing
This
will
light.
produce carbon dioxide. Yeah, I'll get to this in a moment. Will produce carbon dioxide, and therefore the greater the population, the more carbon dioxide we emit. And so some young people are really considering not to have children because of this. Very, very sad. And when they get to be 60 or 70 years old and they find out that this climate thing was foolish and it was wrong, and they don't have families, it will be really a tragedy. But we've had people warning us about population for years and years now. The image there is the image of the population bomb, which was a worldwide bestseller by Paul Ehrlich in the late 60s. And Dr. Ehrlich, he said that we were going to have hundreds of millions of people die in the 1970s and 80s because they wouldn't get enough food because there was too much population. Well, that didn't happen. What he failed to account for was that global agriculture grew faster than population. And so today we still have about, I think the number is about a little under 10% of people that don't have adequate nutrition. But back in 1970, that was about 25% of global population. So people are getting to be better fed, and the warnings about population were wrong. Mr. Ehrlich also made some crazy claims. He said if he was a betting man, he'd bet 50-50 that the United Kingdom wouldn't be in existence in the year 2000 because of the population issues. So we've had people arguing against population and warning about it for many, many years. And the idea of climate change now being due to population growth is just another one of those crazy warnings.
But more complicated than that is human breathing contributes to climate change. So, let's
talk. That's true. Again, the people, your listeners and your viewers should realize that.
Sorry.
That's all right. Should realize that climate and Earth's greenhouse effect is dominated by nature. That man-made emissions are very, very small when you compare to what comes out of the oceans every day, what comes out of the biosphere. But nevertheless, we do emit about 2 pounds of carbon dioxide every day, every person who breathes. And I wrote an article about the Keystone XL pipeline a few years ago and pointed out that house cats in the United States actually emit more carbon dioxide than the Keystone XL was going to. So, but nevertheless, we had this recent study in England talking about human breathing contributing to climate change. They said some things though that if you're a vegetarian, it doesn't make any difference. You still emit as much as a meat-eating person. But you can put up the next slide. This is another interesting thing about Australia. Australia has more than 1 million wild camels. They call them feral camels that are roaming the outback of Australia. And each camel emits about 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. That is mostly methane, either from the tail end or the nose end. And the nation of Australia actually passed a law in 2011 called the Australian Carbon Farming Initiative Act that called for the reduction of methane emissions through the management in a humane manner of feral goats, feral deer, feral pigs, or feral camels. They actually called for killing of these wild animals so that they would stop emitting so much carbon dioxide. But it's just another crazy a crazy item in the mad world of climatism.
And this probably is the reason that they love Brazil is a good provider of meat from. So we have our camels here, and we export meat. So all the methane is here. My God.
That's good. Well, methane again is a natural substance. Termites emit methane. It's created in the earth and it comes out. There's a lot of natural methane goes into the atmosphere. But again, it's not a big factor. Dr. William Happer, a advisor of mine at Princeton University, has pointed out that the methane in the atmosphere and the absorption of outgoing infrared radiation that's absorbed by methane is saturated. already. So if we emit a little more methane, or even if we double it, there would be very, very little effect on global temperatures. Nevertheless, we have all these laws going into effect, people trying to stop it from the oil and gas industry, and this whole idea that would all stop breathing or stop the camels from breathing or doing whatever. Just another crazy aspect.
Yeah, we already talked about this in a previous video, but your opinion again, CO2 and methane are not a pollution
No,
issues.
they're not.
Oh,
No, they're not. I mean, you might say a lot of methane in the atmosphere isn't so good. Carbon dioxide, though, is the idea is we don't need to reduce carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is green. It's plant food. Any cannabis grower who knows what they're doing in their business has a tank of carbon dioxide, and they pump it into their greenhouse to make their crop grow bigger and faster. There have been hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that show that plants grow bigger and faster with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. You can put up the next slide if you want.
sure, sure.
The one that says CO2 is green.
This one? No.
Nope, missed one, I think. Where did it go?
Oh, it's missing. Yeah, yeah.
It's missing. Okay, well, anyway, there's one called CO2 is green, and it shows a graph of the world's top 7 food crops. And corn and potatoes, wheat, sugarcane, rice, soybeans, sugar beets all grow between 20 and 70% bigger with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Plants get bigger fruits, they get bigger vegetables, they have thicker tree trunks or stems, they have bigger root systems. They're more resistant to drought with higher levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. If there's one compound we can put into the biosphere that is absolutely great for the planet, carbon dioxide is that compound. Yet today we have every business and every university counting their carbon dioxide footprint, trying to reduce it. It's really very, very foolish.
Interesting, interesting. Going forward to another point that is very curious, Hertz, the famous Hertz rental cars
Yes.
company, they bought from Tesla a couple of cars, EVs, and now they are selling these cars. What's
Yeah.
exactly happening with this?
This wasn't another recent headline. They committed to buy 100,000 electric vehicles from Tesla. I think they bought about 60 or so, but now they say they're giving a third of them back. They are selling them, and they found that they're more expensive than internal combustion engine cars.
Wow.
The insurance on electric vehicles in the United States is about 70% higher than a gasoline vehicle. In England, insurance is very high as well. There have been headlines about people having to call around trying to get insurance for EVs and costing as much as £5,000 a year to insure an electric vehicle.
But why?
And
Why
and the
insurance
reason-
is high?
yeah, the reason is repairs, and if there are collisions, they're very expensive.
Oh,
If you have
For the
even a
battery.
minor collision, if you damage the battery in any way, they're really not repairable. You have to replace the whole battery, and the cost of that can be up to $20,000 for a vehicle. So Hertz is getting rid of them. And I think another issue is, people don't want to really don't want to rent an electric vehicle. If you apologize for the noise here. If you usually when you're renting a car, you want to go some distance, and then you get into charging. You're not going 10 miles over. You get into charging problems. You get into other issues, and so I think people really aren't interested in the electric vehicles, and so Hertz is getting rid of them. But it's sort of a black eye for the electric vehicle industry.
Until now, we do not have a used EVs car market in the United States, or do we have?
Well, it's about 9% of new light vehicles last year in the United States were electrics. I think it was 16% globally or so. But the electric vehicle market has hit a speed bump in the last year. The amount of EVs, the number of EVs in Germany sold declined by about 20%. They declined in California for the first time. It appears that the folks that have electric vehicles and wanted them for a second car have purchased them, the early adopters, and now the sales are much, much more difficult. And there's a bunch of other things going on too. We've had a a 20% drop in the used EV market, the market for reselling electric vehicles, just in the last year. And so they're kind of piling up on lots, and they're not able to be sold. So the demand is they're having a little bit of problem, and we're seeing more and more problems with EVs. Insurance was one. Another one is cold weather issues. If you want to go to the next slide,
Sure.
hopefully you've got this one.
This one.
So electric vehicle batteries don't do very well when it gets cold. When you get down to about 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius, you lose about 20% of your driving range. And then down to about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, electric vehicles literally will not charge unless you're in a heated garage. And we just had a big black eye in Chicago in January. There were all these national TV pictures of people pushing Teslas around the charging stations that they couldn't get them charged and they couldn't get them to run. By the way, if you're charging your electric vehicle, you're not supposed to have the heater on either. So when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it's very cold to be standing there or sitting there waiting for your car to charge. And so it's become a big black eye. And then we've got crazy things like Canada, who's considering 100% zero emissions mandate for 2035. And I'm thinking, okay, Canada, it gets cold up there. If you don't have a heated garage in Canada, you will not be able to charge your electric vehicle from December through February if this goes into effect. Again, I'm not somebody who's against electric vehicles. They have their pluses and minuses, but we should not be forcing people to buy electric vehicles with the idea that we could stop the oceans from rising. That is modern superstition.
And is it right that the government keep doing subsidies for this type of vehicles? Because I know that the volume of money invested on these companies of EVs, manufacturing companies, are huge. Do you know the number and who is receiving this money?
Yeah, the numbers are very big. Well, in the United States, you can get a $7,000 tax credit or an amount deducted right off the price of the car.
Wow.
For a new vehicle. And then if it's a used vehicle, you can get another $4,000. And if it's sold again, you can get another discount the third time it's sold. It's pretty amazing. Now in the United States also, we're spending vast amounts of money on renewables, on wind, solar, and electric vehicles and biofuels. For example, during the Obama administration, about 2015, the federal government was spending about $15 billion a year on subsidies for renewables. That dropped to about $8 billion during the Trump administration, about 2020 or so. But now with the Biden administration, they passed a thing called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to pay $40 or $50 billion a year to renewables. I mean, just vast amounts of money is going into systems for green hydrogen and for carbon dioxide and capture, transport pipelines and all sorts of things. These are literally whole industries that they're trying to create with subsidies, electric vehicles as well. So it really is a remarkable thing. And it's all because of the fear of climatism, the fear of man-made global warming.
So I captured that there are 3 different subsidies for wind and solar investments, for individual person to buy and to sell and resell vehicles.
Yes.
And to manufacturing companies. I suppose Tesla and others can receive directly some kind of money. Is it correct?
Well, and there's a bunch for supposedly a new hydrogen industry.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote an article recently, which was in the Washington Examiner, that said, can the government create a hydrogen fuel industry? And what they want to do is to create this industry where we have this hydrogen fuel, which goes into things like making steel and making chemicals, and may go into hydrogen vehicles. Such a thing doesn't exist today. And by the way, it's got to be green hydrogen. It can't be made from natural gas or coal, which is where most of the hydrogen today is made. They want it to be made by electrolysis of water, splitting apart hydrogen molecule or water molecules to get hydrogen, and then using that for fuel in steel and chemicals and other industries. But such an industry doesn't exist today. The hydrogen is produced from natural gas and it's used on site today as an ingredient to a chemical process. We don't ship it around. We don't, except for a few forklifts and a few experimental trains, we don't use it much as a fuel. But all this money is going into this. The world has committed $280 billion a year in subsidies to try and create a hydrogen fuel industry. And I've predicted that that is going to crash. Green hydrogen is about 5 times as expensive as hydrogen from natural gas or coal, and very tough to reduce something by a factor of 5.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see. But it's amazing how much money is being thrown around.
Yeah, impressive. So with all this incomprehensible stuff, in your book you said that we are going towards a green collapse.
Yeah.
What does it mean exactly?
Well, I mean that the push for renewable energy is going to break down. Again, the world is trying to get to net zero, get rid of hydrocarbon fuels, and replace them with wind, solar, biofuels, electric vehicles, those sorts of things. But that is not going to happen. The mountain is just too big, and we are already seeing the first evidence that the breakdown is coming. We talked about the Wall Street firms pulling back from green energy. We talked about the renewable energy companies, that their stock prices are failing. We've seen in the United States, about half of the East Coast wind systems, the suppliers have pulled out. The high interest rates and the material costs are not allowing them to make any money. In England, they recently had an auction for onshore wind, and no companies bid. So the United Kingdom is going to raise the bidding price by 70%. But in Germany, Siemens Wind just received 10 billion euros from the German government to try and prop them up. So we see all these things going on that are saying, wow, this breakdown is a problem. And there's a number of reasons for this. One is higher energy prices. Another is electricity blackouts. And these things are going to get people to step back from the green agenda and try and return to low-cost, reliable energy.
We have 3, 4, or 5 actors in this scenario. So financial companies, manufacturing companies, environmental activists, governments, not only the federal but state governments. Who is leading this process?
Well, it is remarkable. This started back in the 1970s and 1980s. A number of scientists who were computer modelers developed climate models, and they noticed that carbon dioxide was rising in the atmosphere. And they said, this is going to cause the planet to heat up. Humans are causing the rise in carbon dioxide. They're going to cause the planet to heat up. We had a Senate hearing in 1988, and Dr. James Hansen of NASA came and testified. He said he was 99% sure the Earth was warming and humans were causing it. 1 year later, the United Nations set up the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they found within a year that humans were causing dangerous climate change. And then in 1992, we had the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit.
Yep.
And
I was here.
Yep, down there, and 40 nations and the European Union signed a treaty saying they would start reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so the world sort of jumped to a conclusion on this. And for the last more than 30 years, almost 40 years, they've been arguing about how much to reduce emissions and when. But we see more and more that we're not seeing storms that are stronger than normal. We're not seeing more droughts and floods. We've had a very mild change in temperature. The oceans are rising the same as they have been, about 7 or 8 inches a century for the last 150 years. And the catastrophes are just not occurring. But we still have just about all the leaders in the world signed up to this. They're spending about $1 trillion a year on renewables, trying to control global temperatures. But the case for that is very, very weak.
And there are more speech than science to solve the problems, the issues that we have. So
Yeah, there is. The science is, and if you read an article in the press about climate, it's probably wrong. It'll say something like, we're at the warmest time ever, which we're not. There were many, many periods in the last 10,000 years when it was naturally warmer than today, before we had power plants and sport utility vehicles. They will say the oceans are rising abnormally. They're not. If you look at the tide gauges, they say the polar bears are endangered. They're not. We have twice the polar bears now that we had in 1970, primarily because they've put in hunting restrictions, but they're not in any sort of danger. So if you actually look a little bit deeper, and that's what my book Green Breakdown talks about, and also my other books, Climatism and the Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, they talk about how the facts don't support the fear that people have and the measures that governments are trying to put into place around the world.
in your book, you said that price of energy are rising due to green energy. Is it true?
It is. Europe is a perfect example. If you look at Europe, you find the companies that have put in the most wind and solar per person in a nation have the highest electricity prices. If wind and solar were cheaper, you would expect them to have the lower prices if they put in more wind and solar, but it's the exact opposite. In the United States, and you can look at a graph there that I've provided, the grid under pressure, rising electricity prices.
This one?
Green California, which is the most aggressive state on climate in the country, now has the second highest electricity rates, higher than any state except Hawaii. And they're going up very, very fast. I'm just writing another article. California's electricity rates have gone up 98% in the last 15 years. In the United States, the national has gone up 30%, but California's up 98%, much higher than any other state. And that's because of their policies, their green policies, switch to wind, solar, and batteries, and a lot of other things that they're doing. So we're seeing these places where electricity is rising. And what this means is companies can't make a business there, and people's costs get very high, and they tend to look elsewhere.
Interesting. And you said also that we can have power blackouts, but the same blackouts that we had in the past or new types of blackouts?
Well, I didn't provide you a graph on this, but the Energy Information Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Energy, has pointed out that our blackouts, our hours of outage per user are rising. Back about 10 years ago, we had about 3 hours of outage per electricity customer per year, and that was a lot of little ones usually. Now it's up to about 7 or 8 hours a year. It's more than doubled in the last 10 years. And the big reason there is that people are closing down coal plants, in some cases gas plants, in some places nuclear plants. They're putting a lot of intermittent wind and solar in, and then when they get a storm or they get a deep freeze or very warm temperatures, those systems don't work very well, and so they have to institute rolling blackouts. And our grid margin is shrinking. Many people have said that.
Wow.
Members from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission have said that we're heading for very dire straits, and we need to stop closing these plants as fast as we are. The intermittent wind and solar are fundamentally incompatible with always-on energy systems. Again, in Brazil, you have an advantage of a lot of hydropower, which is a real good source.
70% of Brazil electricity is from hydropower.
Yeah, we have about 3 states that I think could get close to net zero electricity. That's Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, which all use a lot of hydropower. But for most of the country, that is not available. And so the more wind and solar we put in, the more we're going to be at risk for outages.
In the past, we talked a little bit about the net zero plan for 2050. Do you not believe, of course, that we will reach net zero in 2050, but 2100 will be?
Well, net zero is a crazy idea. There's nothing in our world that is net zero, really. If you build any kind of a structure, if you build a building and you put glass in it and you put in copper for piping and ceramic and concrete and steel and any materials, those all emit carbon dioxide when they're produced and when they're transported. You can't even build a grass hut that is net zero. If you cut down grass and you cut down wood and you build a hut, you emit carbon dioxide. There's no doubt about it. So the whole idea of net zero really is a faulty concept. It isn't going to occur. There's nothing that we do that is net zero in the world, just about. And this thing is all going to come crashing down. People are going to get back to more sensible energy policy.
Great. That's fantastic. And your books, when can people access them, and how can they read these books? You
Yeah,
have
they
them
can
as,
get them at my website, Green Breakdown, my latest one, which is a complete story about the energy transition.
no, it's not this one. It's this one.
Oh,
No.
back a little further. Go back one more. Go back one more. Go back one more. There it is. So it talks about power plants and home appliances, electric vehicles, heavy industry, ships, planes, and trains, the energy crisis in Europe. It's also a fun book. It's a color paperback, and it has all kinds of crazy sidebars, like the cosmetic surgeon in California who is literally taking tissue from his patients and then converting it into fuel to run his vehicles. But and all these are real headlines. And then I have some other great books as well. The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, which is great. If people have kids going into maybe 8th grade and higher, high school, they're getting a very one-sided view of climate. And I would urge them to get the book, The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism, and that'll give them the real story on climate. But these are available from my website, Steve Gorham, GOREHAM.com, also on Amazon, and there are ebooks as well.
I suppose this is this website here. No?
Yep.
Perfect.
That's the one.
That's the one. Fantastic. Steve Gorenham. So you do not believe in CO2 emissions, methane emissions, and net zero for 2050. That's the conclusion I have.
Well, again, yeah, but see, again, CO2 emissions, there are many, many, and most of them are natural coming out of the ocean. So the small amount humans are adding is very small, and we're not going to be able to change that situation. The Earth's temperatures are going to do what they're going to do. The only sensible thing for us to do is adapt to rising oceans, adapt to temperatures, as we've been doing for all of Earth's history.
But wind and solar can be like an addition of energy, or
Sure. If you if you live in Hawaii, very windy, and you got great solar and no pipelines, and there are many other places. But again, electricity should be compared on what is cost effective, on real pollution emissions, not carbon dioxide, and on how reliable they are. Those are the things we should be looking at.
and having natural gas and coal plants available to support when this wind and
Yep.
solar fails.
Coal, you certainly have to put you have to put the scrubbers on. You have to eliminate the nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide particulates, but we have ways to do that. And then natural gas is very, very clean. So those are still good sources.
Because the size of batteries to replace natural gas and coal support is something fantastic.
Well, it's the cost. I was just looking at that. If you a solar system today, a utility scale solar system costs about $1 million a megawatt. I'm sorry. I think it's about $1 million a megawatt. But to back that up for 4 hours with batteries, it costs you $1.5 million a megawatt. But then if you want to do more, 4 hours is nothing. If you want to back up for a day, which you need to do many cases, you need about 6 times that number of batteries. And then the battery lifetime is only half of what the solar lifetime is. Batteries wear out in about 12 years. So you literally need 10 times the cost of batteries to back up a wind or solar system. It's just astronomical. There are some people doing it, but they're paying for it in their electricity rates.
This information is fantastic. It's very important to compare and to make the balance, comparing natural gas and coal support and batteries to support
Yep.
the intermittence. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve Gordon.
Thank you, Armando.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Till the
Have a
next
good
time.
day. Yes, sure. Bye-bye.